Mr. Bratton, why have we come to Central Park?
For me, Central Park is the perfect example of the New York City turnaround. When I first came here in 1990, this park looked very different. This circle that we're sitting in looked very different. The park was dilapidated, had been poorly maintained. The drug dealing, the homelessness, the disorder was awful.
The difference between how you police in this country and how that's policed in the UK as regards firearms is marked. Are we reaching a time where we need to think about routine arming of police?
One of the wonderful things about your country is that your police unions have consistently voted against being armed because they think that would be a violation of the trust that they have with the community. And this goes back to Sir Robert Peel, that we are the police, we are the community working together. So despite the rise in assaults, you had a horrific assault by a machete on one of your officers recently, that the British police services have consistently voted against arming because they feel that would pull them away from the community. And so I applaud that. While at the same time, you've increased the number of armed officers to deal with terrorism and increased violence. But
what of tasers?
The two countries aren't all that much different, other than that singular aspect of we are armed, every officer is armed.
But more and more UK officers are requesting and are being given and are being trained in the deployment of tasers. That is obviously a non-lethal.
I would strongly encourage that in the process of equipping every New York City police officer with that device. It's the same as your officers are equipped with certain batons, handcuffs. I would encourage that or those types of devices. That's a significant step below a firearm.
Because the taser provides non-lethal, right?
That's correct, and if appropriately used, you have to also carefully train, carefully supervise, carefully manage, because it can be overused, it can be abused.
Should police officers be feared? Should they be respected? Can you have both?
Your new Home Secretary used an expression, she wants criminals to be terrified of the police. I would use the term fear, that criminals want to fear the police because of their competency, their efficiency, but you also want them to respect the police, that they're not going to be abused by the police in the course of their duties.
You want to take us to another part of town now. Where are we going next?
We're going to take you down to Times Square. And Times Square, crossroad of the world, literally. Times Square also back in the 90s was a cesspool. And that's an apt description of it.
Let's go take a look.
A few blocks up the street, years ago, there was a dance hall, the Roseland Ballroom. There were a lot of young people who liked to go on weekends, whatever the dance style was in 1990. And it was during the week of the U.S. Open, the equivalent of your Wimbledon. And our mayor at the time, Dave Dinkins, big tennis fan. This was a big tourist event to bring people here. There's a family from Utah, the Watkins family, mother, father, sister, brother, several others. They were heading out to the U.S. Open. And they went into a subway station a few blocks from here. And while they were on the platform waiting for the train, this group of young men and women, but mostly men, came into the subway station specifically to rob people to get money to go to the dance hall, to the Roseland dance hall. In the middle of accosting the Watkins family, they injured the mother, injured the father, and stabbed Brian Watkins, the son, to death. Needless to say, Dave Dinkins, new mayor, during the height of the big tourist attraction. I was chief of the transit police at that time, so it happened in my jurisdiction. 2 days later, Governor Cuomo, Mario Cuomo, the father of the current governor, his office called to tell me, as chief of transit, we're going to give you $40 million to use to improve safety in the subways.
How did you spend it?
Well, that investment ended up eventually, what you see here, what we saw up at Columbus Circle. $10 million went to police overtime to significantly increase the number of officers, specifically focused on areas of disorder and crime. Radios for our officers, many of whom did not have them, what we had didn't work. New equipment, facilities. The beginning of the New York miracle began in the subways.
Better firearms?
Below ground. And also better firearms. The New York officers at that time were equipped with 38 six-shot revolvers. Many of the criminals they were encountering were now equipped with semi-automatic weapons. And I had a major battle with the mayor at the time, the police commissioner at the time, the New York Times, which is right around the corner, who were all opposed to arming New York City officers with better weaponry. I won that battle in subway police.
So take that back to UK, where the battle at the moment is to give officers tasers. I mean, that is just from what you've achieved. That's a starting point, right?
I would see that as extraordinarily beneficial for morale for your officers, that you care about them and their safety. But as you know, your officers really don't want the majority of them to carry firearms. But at the same time, you have an obligation to help them protect themselves and the public. And one of the things that can be effective against knife-type crime, rather than guns, is a taser.
And that's a massive problem in London, in Birmingham, and other cities in the UK, knife crime. So that gives the officer what he or she requires.
Exactly, and if you take it back to the New York experience, my transit cops, that was the amount of their morale, that we cared for them. We were giving them, in this country, weaponry to deal with the weapons they were up against.
The time you've spent with Boris Johnson as London Mayor, who's now our Prime Minister, you have a level of confidence in him?
That I had the experience when he was mayor, what he was trying to do as mayor. You've got the experience when he was mayor, what he was trying to do. But more recently, 2015, 16, he was in the city promoting his new book on Churchill, the new book at that time. And he very specifically was aware that the city had changed. And he wanted, he knew me, he wanted some sense of exactly as you're talking about, what had happened here to make it so different. And so we had him here, we took him from here on a subway ride down to Wall Street. And in Wall Street, we have a huge security camera complex, private sector, police cameras that are being constantly monitored. He was very taken with that. He didn't feel that London, despite having more cameras than any place in the world, they weren't as coordinated as they are here. So that might be something you might see him.
So he was really receptive to what you and your colleagues were showing?
He was receptive to it, and the ride in the subway, the idea of quality of life control. He gets quality of life control. Quite obviously, a new Home Secretary does. But my advice, and it's worth what they're paying for it, nothing, is that once again, move in a very careful, planned way with guardrails, because you can have unintended consequences of the most well-intended actions.